Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. Hello and welcome to another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I'm Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Miss Denise Dielwart. Denise is a trauma specialist, and she works with grief, helping people overcome, and she helps do this in a very fast way, much faster than just being able to do it on your own. She does it through this method she has discovered called the Flow Grief Release Method. And she came up with this method after going through her own bouts of grief. She's going to tell us all about it. But Denise, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Amber, for having me on today and giving me the opportunity to share my journey and a path to healing grief.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. This is definitely something that affects people that I think unless you've fully experienced grief, it's hard to relate to probably some of the things that you've experienced or you've even seen people that you work with experience. And I'm sure we're going to get into all of that. But why don't you just kind of start by telling us about yourself and what moved you into this line of work?
Yeah, so I'm in Australia, so it's early morning for me, so which is great. I lost my husband when I was 51. He was 55. He died really suddenly from a blood clot. He went to work and didn't come home. We were living on acreage at the time, on 8 acres. We had built our forever home. The kids had all moved out of house, and we were just starting our forever life again together. And I was working from home in my previous life, as I call it. I was a bookkeeper, tax agent, and so I worked from home. I worked for small businesses, and he also worked from home. So we were basically, together, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd have a wine at the pool and just relax and watch the kangaroos hop past, because being on acreage, it was beautiful. We were just stepping into our life. And on this particular Monday morning, he went to work and kissed each other goodbye, bye, have a good day. And half an hour later, he called to say that he's got incredible backache. Can I call the ambulance, call the doctor? And by the time I didn't even have time to call the doctor, and he said, called back again and said, I've collapsed on the side of the road, call an ambulance. So that was the start of my journey. Unbeknownst to us that, he had a blood clot, and he passed away. There was no goodbyes for me or my kids or anybody else. So that in itself was hugely traumatic. You can imagine, it's not something that you're expecting. He wasn't sick a day in his life or anything. So there was no warning. There was absolutely no warning. And that's how my journey started. I went into complete la la land, as I call it, as I say. I was walking outside of my body. You feel as though you're walking outside of your body, that the world is turning, but you're not. And I started forgetting things. I didn't know any other widows or people that had lost a husband. Being so young, it's not something that you're exposed to. I had lost my parents. I'm an only child as well. So, but then I had Martin. I had my kids as a backup. And this time I had no backup. And I went for counselling, I went for therapy, and it just wasn't helping. It wasn't helping me at all. And I remember saying to my psychologist at the time, I said to her, when am I going to feel better? And she said, Denise, you've just lost your husband. Grief takes time, and you're going to be like this for the next 5 to 7 years. And that's when I had a major meltdown on the way home. I hit the steering wheel of the car and I screamed and I yelled, there's no way that I'm going to be like this for the next 5 to 7 years. And that's when my healing journey started. That's when I started really. Martin passed away in 2009. So there wasn't the Facebook groups that I could join, and there wasn't anything like that. I mean, Facebook was still in its infancy back then. So it was really me finding my way of healing me and not my grief.
Wow, your story is definitely touching, and hearing you tell it is, I can see how that would be hard for anybody. And as you tell it, I am also thinking back to the people that I've interviewed and people that I've talked to that just have experienced grief, and I can't fully relate to it. I mean, I've definitely had, grieved over certain things, but never to someone that is, I guess, that close to me.
Yeah.
So, I want to like I want to know, like, how did this, obviously it affected you greatly. You're still a mom, right? You have kids. So you have to start to navigate through this new life of like,
Yeah.
I'm a mom, I have to be strong for my kids. Like,
Yes.
how does one even begin to navigate through that?
Well, what I did was, is I shut down. I shut me down. I didn't feel my feelings. I basically just soldiered on. I went through all the motions. I continued working in my business, doing bookkeeping. I don't know how I did it, balancing and reconciling bank accounts and all the stuff that you do as a bookkeeper. And I had to be there for my kids. This was my belief at the time. This was my thinking. I had to be there for my kids, even though my kids were adult kids, but I had grandchildren as well. So as women, this is what we do. We shut ourselves down and we serve everybody else until one day, one afternoon, I came back from a very difficult client. This particular client, I was doing her books, and she was one of those people that had no interest in what I was doing, expected me to just do it all out of a shoebox. And, all her receipts and everything was in a shoebox, and expected me to know what every expense was for. Every time I asked her, what is this for? She said, I don't know. And I was feeling, obviously you don't tell your clients that you've lost your husband because it's unprofessional. So you tell nobody. So we keep it all in. And on the way home, I just broke down. I just cried and screamed. And I knew that I couldn't do this anymore, that I couldn't hide my feelings. I couldn't pretend that I was okay. I had to basically drop my mask, the I'm okay mask. How are you going? Oh, I'm okay. Oh, and then, people say, you're so strong. And you're thinking, no, I'm not. But to the world, you've got your mask on that you're okay. So everybody then just leaves you alone and thinks, well, you're okay. And, you don't need any help, but you're actually struggling. And I was struggling. My psychologist didn't help me. I knew that she wasn't going to help me. I couldn't wait for time. The pain wasn't going away. I was lonely. I was feeling isolated. I was feeling betrayed. I was feeling the victim. I was the victim. I was absolutely the victim of my grief, which is normal. We have to be the victim. But it was when I realized, and I sort of came to the conclusion after, sitting and thinking, what am I going to do? I can't go on like this. I thought, well, I have to heal myself. I have to do the inner work on myself. I have to heal, because if I don't heal, my grief is not going to heal. And I'd already been on the personal development treadmill before that. Martin and I had, were very, very personally developed people. We always, saw the positive side. We followed Anthony, Tony Robbins and all that type of thing. So that's why I thought I could do it on my own. I've got this. I can do it on my own. Until you realize that we can't do it on our own because we come up against ourselves.
So transition us just a little bit from mom, wife, going through that grief. Is this when you begin to see this issue of not being able to, like, the struggle of healing to the point that now you have to create something for people that helps them, like, overcome this faster? Or was this something that you discovered accidentally and then you just it helped you, and so you started helping others?
Yeah, it was something I discovered. Because I was at that stage, I was still in the bookkeeping corporate area of my life. I started helping businesses, and I became a business coach because that's what I thought I would do. I would help businesses create more profit, and that was my comfort zone. Until people and directors of companies and CEOs used to say to me, Denise, why are you working in the business field? You should be working with people in grief. Look how quickly you've healed yourself. And there was no way I was going to do that. It was not going to happen. No, I've healed me, not going to happen. And then I'd bump into somebody I haven't seen for a while. And I said, gee, you're looking good, Denise. Wow, what are you doing? And I'd tell them what I'm doing, how I healed, how I worked through my grief. And they go, why aren't you working with people in grief? And I go, no, I don't want to do that. I'm doing the corporate thing now, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't see me doing what I'm doing now. Until the voice in my head and the tap on my shoulders and everybody telling me became so loud that I went, okay, universe, you want me to work with people in grief? Show me. Tell me how. And then that's when my journey started. And I went, okay, how did I heal myself? What did I do? So I reverse engineered my journey and how I healed so quickly. And that's how I started helping people. That's how my flow method was born.
How long has it been since your husband passed?
He passed away in 2009, so it's 15 years. 15 years he's been since he passed away. So I've been working with people about 14 years.
Oh, so you started working with people soon after.
Yeah.
What did that transition look like? So you're in the middle of grief, you're falling apart, and you leave and you're like about to break. Take us from that point into, like, the journey that you experienced.
Yeah.
After you walked away from that.
Absolutely, yeah. So the first thing I did when I got home was I hit the wine. I hit the wine. I actually wiped myself out that night with wine. To the extent that with every glass I cried, and that was my fork in the road when I woke up in the morning and I realized, wow, I can't continue like this. Because remember, I'm in a huge 5-bedroom home on 8 acres. So easy for me to hit the bottle and continue drinking, and just wallow in my sorrow. And I thought, I know, I'll become a life coach. And that's where my journey began. Now, my thinking then was I was never going to work with anybody. But if I became a life coach, I would get the tools to help myself. My personality is don't employ somebody, don't hire somebody to help me. I'll do it and then help myself. So that way I've got the tools. I'm getting it firsthand. So that was my journey through human development, and I started with life coaching, and then I went on to all the other modalities and hypnosis and NLP and human psychology, and so I grew through that to know how to heal grief, because grief is is an emotion. And so many people say, oh, yeah, grief is love. Yes, it is love. But it is also an emotion. We can't heal emotions.
Mm.
We have to heal ourselves. It's a personal growth. It's a going within. It's learning to love ourselves. Who am I now? Now, that was my biggest question is, who am I now?
Do you think that people put their worth or their, they start to, like, especially in marriage, because in marriage it is kind of like you get married to become one. So do you think people they grow so much into that person that then when that person's gone, they don't know how to function without that person?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. You have to rediscover who you are. You know, in my case, Martin and I got married. I met him when I was 16, and we got married young, had our kids young. So by the time, and we're together for 32 years. So by the time that he passed away, we were one. We worked together. We did everything together. We were together 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we don't rediscover who we are, because I didn't know who I was at 16. Who am I? I'm a 16-year-old girl. At 18, when we got married, and I was, I was a child. So that was the biggest question. And with all the especially widows that I work with, it's well, what do I do now? Who am I? And that's where we can get stuck in our grief and get stuck in our past, is because it's, well, that, and the expectation, society's expectation, is that you're just going to continue your life as it was. And it's impossible to do.
It's not that easy. Well, how do
No.
you think this is, I mean, and I know that you've not experienced like the death of a child, but how do you think this compares?
Well, you can't really compare because they're two different griefs. I have an amazing coach that I've taught, because I've also got the academy as well, where I help people do what I'm doing now and teach them how I do it. And she lost her daughter. Her daughter died at school. She died away because her daughter was away at school, and it was actually due to negligence. The school didn't give her the right help when she needed it. And there as well, it's very different because you've lost a child. But where it's so different is that when you lose a child, you've got other children and a husband 9 times out of 10 that are all grieving and grieving differently. So it's not just, if you've lost your husband or you've lost your wife, you don't have all those other dynamics around you. You could have young children that are grieving, but it's a different grief. So you can't compare one to the other in any shape or form, because losing a child is different to losing a husband or a wife, a life partner.
Mm-hmm. Did your flow method work with all grief or just with spousal?
No, with all grief, because it's an inner journey. But if you lose a child, you've still got to do your own inner work on your journey. Who am I now without that child? Yes, I'm still a mother, but we lose our identity. With any loss, you lose your identity.
Yeah.
So it's rediscovering and reimagining your new life without that person, whether it's a child, whether it's a husband. It's reimagining your new life without that person. What does that look like?
Can you even fathom that in the beginning? I know that
No.
grief, you have stages of grief, right?
No, you don't have stages of grief. I do not teach the stages of grief at all. The stages of grief is the biggest myth in the grief world. Everybody says you've got to go through the 5 stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief came from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross way back in the 1960s. She wrote her book called On Death and Dying for people that were diagnosed with a terminal illness. It was never intended for anybody that had lost a loved one.
Mm.
But because back in the 60s there was this whole, there was no gold standard, nobody knew what to do, it was adopted. The 5 stages of grief was adopted as the golden standard and the stages to go through.
Mm.
So
you think there's no stages to grief, it's just grief.
it's grief, it's pain. How do you you can't go through grief and say, well, I'm in this stage now, I'm in the anger stage. Because you can be, I have so many clients that say to me, Denise, I don't feel angry. What am I going to be angry? Am I grieving the right way? There's no way to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartache, it's pain, it's mess, it's falling apart, and then it's feeling okay about it, then it's feeling guilty, then it's feeling lonely, then it's feeling, you can't go through grief linearly and say, well, this is the stage you're at now and you're going to be there for 2 months. This is the stage you're in now, so you've got to go from there to there. It doesn't work that way.
Mm. So you've worked with people that have experienced all different types of grief.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. And that's why I said grief is not, you can't compare one to the other. You can't even compare one widow to another widow, because everybody grieves according to who they are, according to how they see their world, according to it's not even, so many people say, you see these memes. That's another thing, the pet hate of mine is memes, all these negative memes about grief. I always say to everybody, stop reading them. Stop reading the memes about grief, because they're keeping you stuck. They're keeping you stuck, because you read a meme and you go, yep, I know, that's exactly how I feel. Yep, I like that. And then you move on. You're not actually, they don't help. They keep you stuck in your grief.
Mm-hmm.
Because grief is so individual to everybody, regardless of the circumstances of the person that you've lost. It's individual.
So basically it's different for every person. So it's all completely unique. There's one big pain that comes with grief, and it's a unique pain in every situation. Is this what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We all grieve in our own way. And why do we grieve in our own way? Because our life is different. We are individuals. The relationship we had with that person is different. For example, my kids grieved their dad differently to what I grieved him, because our relationship was different.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
there's no cookie cutter for grief. And unfortunately, we all want somebody to fix us. Take my pain away from me. Tell me what to do and I'll do it.
do you find working with people to help them overcome grief that you're seeing this happen, they're overcoming of this much faster?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we have, and here's the thing. When we lose somebody, we try and do it on our own. We try and navigate this on our own. But we can't heal ourselves to the extent that if we work with somebody and we're working on ourselves. Because what happens when we start doing the inner work on ourselves, because it takes inner work and growth, we have to grow into a new person, a new version of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not keeping the old and bringing it into this life. We can't continue that life. That life is gone. We're actually writing a whole new book, not even a whole chapter. It's a whole new book.
Would you look at this almost like peeling back a layer of an onion?
Yeah, totally. Totally peeling back the layers. Because grief puts a magnifying glass on our life. We start questioning, who am I now? Our mortality. We start thinking about life. We start philosophizing. It just, when we lose somebody, it brings our mortality into questioning. So we start thinking about our life. Now, what 95% of people do is they go, well, I'll just wait for time. And everybody says, just wait for time. Time heals all. It doesn't. It makes it worse. We cannot wait for time. Because all time does is you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And you're not going to wake up in the morning, one morning, and go, oh my goodness, look at my whole world has changed. I feel so much better. Why does it make it worse? Because we replay that one moment of time when we lost that person, when we lost our loved one. We replay it over and over and over again in our head. And what does that do? It creates more sadness. It creates more anxiety. It just builds on each other. What we have to do and how I work with my clients is we draw a line in the sand and we say, okay, that happened to you. Let's move you forward now. Mm-hmm. We're not forgetting about the love you had. We're not forgetting about the life you had. But let's create your new future.
So can you expand on that just a little bit, like maybe the process of what that looks like when someone comes to you with grief and they say, I really want to heal from this? Like, what is that process that you take them through?
So that's the flow method. The first step is to feel. F for feel. We have to feel our emotions. We have to feel our pain. Now, feeling our pain is not just crying about it. It's not just feeling bad or feeling sad or feeling lonely, because beneath that are layers. It's going beneath that sadness, beneath that loneliness, beneath that isolation, really feeling it. Mm-hmm. Once we feel it, we can acknowledge it. We know, okay, this is what I'm feeling. This is the emotion I'm feeling. And for everybody, it's different. For everybody, it's different. You know, it might be I'm feeling guilty. Okay, so you're feeling guilty. What are you feeling guilty about? How are you feeling guilty? Why are you feeling guilty? All this. And then as we start going into the guilt. But when if you don't feel it, you don't know you're feeling guilty. You just know if you're crying. You don't know. You might say, oh, I feel so guilty, but you're not actually feeling that guilt. Mm. Once you acknowledge and you know, now you can start letting go. Whether it's guilt, whatever the emotion is, as I said, for everybody it's different. Now you can start letting go. That's the L in the flow method. Now you're not letting go of the person. You're not letting go of the love. You're letting go of the pain. You're letting go of the sadness. You're letting go of that emotion. And that's where we start going, okay, let's let it go. There's a whole process we do and we work together through that. Now you can overcome because you know what you let go of. Now you know, okay, I'm letting go of that. Mm-hmm. The overcoming is really when you start reimagining your new life. Start rediscovering who you are. That's the overcoming, because we cannot do that until we start feeling it. We have to let it go so that we can then go. It's a journey into self. Mm-hmm. Now you can start overcoming. And once you do that, now you can become a whole person with a reimagined life. You know who you are, you love yourself, and you're ready to face your new life.
And the success you see with this process is good or amazing?
Absolutely. Everybody that does the work, it's an 8-week program that I created. So 2 months. And I work, basically it's an online program. You do the work, you do the back end, you do all the work that you need to do on yourself. It's a journey into self. As I said, it's the inner work. It's doing the inner work on yourself, rediscovering who you are. But I also work very closely with my clients one-on-one. Mm. So it's not a group coaching or group program at all. It's a one-on-one. So you do the work, you've got the program, and then we work one-on-one. I help unpack what's come up for you. How are you feeling? Because like I said earlier, grief is unique to everybody. Everybody grieves in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe that we need to take years and years and years and live with the pain. Because if we don't heal quickly, grief plays havoc on our body.
And how do you see that play out?
I see that play out in cancers returning. Ladies that have had cancer, breast cancer, their cancers return. I see broken-hearted syndrome, which is a real thing. I see, broken-hearted syndrome is because our grief affects our heart, right? One of my clients actually thought that she was having a heart attack. She went and had all the tests done for it. Nothing showed up. And when we started working together, I explained to her how her emotions affect her heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real thing. People die from broken-hearted syndrome. So it's not something that you can say, oh, well, it's a nice to have. Oh, I wish I could. It's really important. It's urgent. Because I know when I was going down that road, I could have easily have gone down the road of destruction and illness. And I've got rheumatoid arthritis, so I knew I had to not stress myself out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'd be down that road of more pain, more. I've had one client that had breast cancer, and she's after her husband died, she discovered that he was having an affair she didn't know about, and I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks after he passed away, she contacted me and started working with me. Mm-hmm. And why did she do that? Because she didn't want her breast cancer to return, because she knew that if she was stressed, her breast cancer, the likelihood of her breast cancer returning is high.
Yeah. Trauma definitely has an effect on our bodies.
Yeah, it does. So, plus she wanted to grieve for her husband because she was so angry with him for having an affair, you can imagine. And she needed to grieve. She needed to break herself down and grieve. So we did the inner work. Mm. She did the inner work. And, today her life has changed completely. And this is the thing, is that grief changes us. When we lose a loved one, it changes us forever. So we're not that same person we were before. Mm. But who am I now?
And you have to discover that, huh?
Yeah. And it's really hard to discover that on your own, because you bash up against your own head. When things get tough, when we sort of, we can't break our own habits. We can't break or we can, but I mean, it takes a very special way of doing that as well. And strength, if you're going to do that, and awareness, which most of us don't have. Because when things get tough, what do? We go, oh no, that's too hard. I'm not going to do that. That's not working. I tried that. It didn't work. Mm-hmm. It's not that it didn't work. It's that you didn't work and push through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you didn't see it through, or you didn't know how to do it. And sometimes this is why I think having a mentor or a coach or someone that has been through it to help you through, it really helps. I think the hard thing for people is finding that the person that is that person, you know what I'm saying, that can help them, because it's overwhelming sometimes with grief. Well, I can speak from the perspective of trauma, because that's what I do here. Talk to people with trauma, talk to people that have overcome trauma. And it's all different types of trauma from all over the board. But specifically when we talk about grief, which I think is very similar, it's just a smaller form of trauma. That it's overwhelming sometimes, because you're just trying to survive. Like when you have undergone a traumatic situation and it's causing you to grieve the situation, sometimes it's just a matter of like getting through the day, and that's important. So I think when you can take and start to start to really heal, you get to a place in your journey in your life where you can really heal, I think that's where things get really beautiful. And it's almost like the butterfly coming out of the cocoon, like now you've discovered a whole new self. And I would imagine, I mean, I've again never experienced grief on that level. And I mean, we all hope that we never do. But the reality is, we live in a world that, death is inevitable. And so when we do get to that point of having to grieve, or if you've ever been at that point of having to grieve, it's like you have to find a place and you have to find a modality and you have to find some type of help, because living life with that gaping hole it's not a way to live life. And
No.
I think sometimes just trying to cope through that and then navigate through what can I do to cope, it's a really hard thing.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, our talk therapy doesn't work. We have to take action. We can't talk our way through trauma or grief. We just can't do it. We have to do the inner work. We have to do the work on ourselves. We can't, I look back at my days with my therapist, and every week it was the same thing. It was the same. Talk about it. Tell me about it. How are you feeling? We were focused on that moment of time when Martin died, and focused on, well, what do you want to do now? I didn't know what I wanted to do now. I didn't know who I was. And it was only when I started my inner journey and I started healing me that my world started unfolding. Like you said, the butterfly. You suddenly see things that you didn't know. When my clients see me and we start working together, my first question to them is, what do you want for your future? Do you know what the answer is? I don't know. Because they don't know. We don't know. We cannot see a future. But by the end of the 8 weeks or the 2 months that we work together, they know where they want to go. They know what the next step is. They know what they want to do, because they've now got a roadmap. They know who they are. They know to love themselves. And they've rediscovered, wow, I used to bake and I haven't baked in years. Or I used to play, an instrument and I haven't played music for years. And suddenly that comes up again. That starts rising and they go, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to travel. But when we started, that was not on the radar.
Yeah. So tell us, Denise, like are you doing anything currently, or like any group type things, or how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more about the flow method, and maybe they're struggling with grief?
Yeah, absolutely. I offer a free grief breakthrough call where I spend about 45 minutes to 60 minutes with anybody that wants to know what to do, how to do it, where they're at, and we discover where you are in your journey. We discover if you're ready to move forward, because some people are not ready yet. They need a little bit more time. Because grief, I work so closely with my clients, and I don't have millions of clients. I have a select few, and I choose who I work with. You have to be ready. You have to be wanting to change. Because if we don't want to change, if we're expecting somebody else to fix us, which is the model that everybody's used to, I'll go see a therapist and then the therapist will tell me what to do. It doesn't work, because we have to drop all that armor. We have to drop that please come and fix me. And be prepared to roll up our sleeves, because we both roll up sleeves together and we get down into what is actually keeping you stuck. What belief is it? What programs are you running? All of that plays a huge part in how you heal and how you move forward in grief.
I love that. If you had something like If someone come to you right now and said they're struggling with grief, or you knew someone was listening right now, like what is some kind of practical first steps?
So some practical first steps would be to stop pretending that you're okay. Remove your mask, remove your armor, and then journal. Just write down how you want to be feeling. Don't journal how you are feeling, because that keeps you in your feelings, that keeps you in your grief, it keeps you in your pain. Journal, just write, just let it flow. How do I want to feel? Not how should I feel, how do I want to feel? Because people will say to you, oh, you should be here and you should. No, there's no shoulds. You don't should have to do anything.
Well, people
Don't.
always I think they attest to what they've been through and then they compare it to what you're going through, but what they fail to recognize is that people are all different. So
Yeah,
something may affect you much differently than it affects me.
yeah.
It's
And
no right or
that's
wrong.
absolutely. And that's why I was going to say, don't listen to others. Don't get into grief groups and feed into everybody's sadness.
Mhm.
Because I have a group as well where I don't allow anybody to really. They can come in, share their story, but it's all uplifting. It's helping that person. It's not being a feeding frenzy, and you see it in all the grief groups. I know how you feel. I felt the same way. My husband died or my child died, and I feel like this, and it's terrible. And somebody else, and you can get like 200 or 300 comments on that one comment. Somebody can say, I'm having a bad day. And instead of everybody going in and say, I know it happens to all of us, but hey, why don't you try this and try that and go for a walk? Or it's all about how bad they feel. It's almost like this competition of, I feel just as bad, I feel worse. Don't go into those places. Don't sit and talk about it with everybody. Because we have to, what I call, scratch that record. You have to practically go, how do I want to feel? What am I feeling now? And how do I want to change that?
Yeah, I love it. So if you had one like final big takeaway that you'd want to leave my audience with, what would that be?
Grief never heals. The loss of a loved one and that grief never heals. We heal. We heal so that grief is now love. So you're not looking back at your life with pain and with sorrow. Live their legacy. Live your best life. And live it with love, because that's what you had with them, is love. So heal yourself. Learn to love yourself. Put yourself first. And focus on that rather than the grief and the loss.
I love it. Denise, I know you've been through a lot. I so love your work and what you're doing to help other people overcome grief. And I truly believe in your efforts. And I just always want to be able to support you in whatever you're doing. But I do really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today. This has been eye-opening and also just very enlightening to know. And I just hope that if any of the listeners, like if you are struggling with grief, reach out to Denise, pass along this podcast episode, and get it into the right hands of those that are struggling. But thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me as well, and giving me the opportunity to share, because grief is very important for me. It's my life work. It's my mission, is to help people live and thrive, not just live after grief, but thrive after the loss of a loved one.
Yeah, so Denise is doing amazing work. Be sure to reach out to her, get all the details, and that will be in the show notes as well. And again, thank you so much, Denise. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.